spine-chilling episode of Nightmares in Onyx. I'm your host, Vincent, and tonight we delve into the darker side of the holiday season. In the tapestry of human existence, sound weaves the very fabric of our reality. But what happens when that thread is suddenly, inexplicably pulled away? For Thomas Wilkins, the answer to this question would become his living nightmare. So dim the lights, settle in, and prepare yourself for the gift of silence. It was Christmas Eve in the quaint town of Evergreen Falls, a place where holiday cheer seemed to seep from every snow-capped rooftop and twinkling window. But for Thomas, a 45-year-old accountant with a penchant for solitude, the season brought only bitter reminders of his isolation. As he had for the past decade, Thomas sat alone in his dimly lit living room, a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the coffee table beside him. The only concession to the holiday was a small, artificial tree in the corner, its lights blinking half-heartedly in the gloom. Thomas glanced at his watch. 11:55 p.m. In 5 minutes, it would be Christmas, and he would toast another year of loneliness. "Bah, humbug," he muttered, chuckling darkly at his own cliché. The grandfather clock in the hallway began to chime, marking the quarter hour. Thomas closed his eyes, listening to the familiar sound. 1, 2, 3. The fourth chime never came. Thomas's eyes snapped open. The sudden silence was jarring, almost painful in its completeness. He set down his glass and walked to the hallway, frowning at the old clock. Its pendulum had stopped mid-swing, frozen in time like an insect in amber. "Damn thing," Thomas grumbled, tapping the clock's face. When nothing happened, he sighed and turned back to the living room, only to find he was no longer alone. Standing before the Christmas tree was a figure shrouded in shadow, its form seeming to shift and waver like smoke. The only distinct features were two piercing silvery eyes that seemed to bore into Thomas's very soul. Thomas opened his mouth to scream, but no sound emerged. The figure raised a finger to where its lips should be, and Thomas felt an icy chill run down his spine. What are you?" Thomas managed to whisper, his voice sounding thin and reedy in the oppressive silence. The figure's voice seemed to echo inside Thomas's head, rather than through the air. "I am the spirit of silent night," it intoned, "and I have come to grant you your heart's desire." Thomas shook his head, backing away. "I don't understand. I didn't wish for anything." The spirit's eyes seemed to glow brighter. "Didn't you? How many times have you sat in this very room, cursing the sounds of celebration from outside? How often have you wished for peace and quiet?" Before Thomas could protest further, the spirit reached out and touched his forehead. The world went black. When Thomas awoke, sunlight was streaming through his windows. He sat up, head pounding, convinced he had dreamed the whole encounter. But as he stumbled to the kitchen for coffee, he realized something was terribly wrong. The world was completely, utterly silent. No matter what Thomas did, turning on the TV, radio, even smashing a plate on the floor, he couldn't hear a thing. Panic rising, he ran outside, but the silence persisted. Cars moved noiselessly down the street. Children's mouths opened in silent laughter, and even the birds in the trees seemed to be miming their songs. At first, Thomas thought he had gone deaf, but a visit to the doctor, communicated through hastily scribbled notes, revealed nothing physically wrong with his ears. As far as the world was concerned, sound still existed. Thomas simply couldn't perceive it. Days turned into weeks, and Thomas's silent world remained. He couldn't work, couldn't communicate, couldn't bear the oppressive quiet that surrounded him. He tried to explain his predicament to others, but they only looked at him with confusion or pity. Some suggested psychological help. Others hinted at substance abuse. No one believed the truth. the silence began to wear on Thomas's sanity. He found himself talking out loud constantly, desperate to hear his own voice, only to be met with that terrible, all-encompassing quiet. He left the TV on 24/7, staring at the moving images and imagining the sounds that should accompany them. As Christmas approached once again, Thomas found himself spiraling into despair. The thought of another year in this silent prison was unbearable. He began to contemplate drastic measures, anything to escape the quiet. On Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after his encounter with the spirit, Thomas sat in his living room, surrounded by crumpled papers filled with desperate pleas and explanations. The bottle on his coffee table was now completely empty, and a note lay beside it, his final goodbye to a world he could no longer be part of. Just as Thomas reached for the bottle of pills he'd procured, he felt a presence behind him. He turned to see the shadowy figure once more, its silver eyes gleaming. "Have you learned to appreciate the gift of sound?" the spirit asked in Thomas's mind. Thomas nodded frantically, tears streaming down his face. He tried to speak, to beg, but even in his mind, words failed him. The spirit's form seemed to waver. "Remember this lesson well," it warned, "for in the cacophony of life, true meaning is often found in the spaces between the noise. But beware, silence, like any power, can corrupt. Use your newfound appreciation wisely." With that, the spirit began to fade. As it disappeared, Thomas felt a rush of sensation, as if his ears had suddenly popped after a long flight. And then, gloriously, sound returned. The ticking of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, even his own ragged breathing. It was all almost too much to bear. Thomas sobbed with relief, reveling in every tiny noise. As the clock struck midnight, the church bells began to ring, their joyous peals announcing the arrival of Christmas Day. To Thomas, it was the most beautiful music he had ever heard. In the days that followed, Thomas's life changed dramatically. He reached out to old friends and family, reveling in every conversation. He volunteered at a local music school, helping children discover the joy of creating sound. He even started dating Sarah, the kind-hearted nurse who had tried to help him during his episode. But as months passed and Thomas's appreciation for sound deepened, he began to notice something unsettling. In moments of quiet, the pause between sentences, the hush of early morning, he sometimes caught a glimpse of silvery eyes watching him from the shadows. And in those moments, a chilling thought would cross his mind. Had the spirit truly left? Or was it now always with him, lurking in every quiet moment, waiting to plunge him back into that terrible silence? And so, dear listeners, we leave Thomas Wilkins on this Christmas Eve, caught between joy for the symphony of life and fear of the quiet that lurks beneath. In this world of constant noise, perhaps we should all take a moment to listen, truly listen, to the silence. For who knows what messages or warnings it might contain. Before we part ways on this chilling night, I have a small request. If you enjoyed our journey into the realm of nightmares in Onyx, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing these dark tales to life. And don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a silence so profound it felt unnatural? Or perhaps you have your own eerie holiday tale to share. We'd love to hear from you. Lastly, if you know someone who appreciates a good scare, even during the festive season, why not share this episode with them? After all, fear is best when it's shared. Until next time, this is Vincent, reminding you to cherish the sounds of life, for in the world of nightmares in Onyx, silence may not always be golden. Pleasant dreams, if you dare.